Welcome to RP Revenge.
The letter arrived on a gray Wednesday morning, tucked neatly between grocery flyers and utility bills, as if it were just another piece of meaningless paper. I almost threw it out. But then I saw the handwriting, sharp, precise, and familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. It was my grandmother's. Her letters had always carried a faint scent of lavender and old ink, the same scent that clung to her hands when she used to braid my hair as a child. But this one smelled different, something metallic like rust or blood. I didn't know why that scared me until I unfolded the paper and read the first line. Effective immediately. You are to be removed from my will. My eyes stopped there. Consider it the consequence of wasting your life. No greeting. No closing. Just those words cut clean as a knife. I stared until the letters blurred. The air felt thick, heavy. I tried to breathe, but something inside me had cracked. Something I didn't even realize could still break. Wasting my life. I whispered, my voice too small in the quiet of my apartment. The words echoed anyway. I sank into a chair, the letter trembling in my hands. I read it again and again, as if the meaning would change if I punished myself enough times. But it didn't. It stayed cruel, final. And the irony. For the past 8 months, I'd been secretly paying her medical bills. Dialysis, medication, home nursing. Every last cent came out of my savings, my paychecks, my side gigs. She didn't know, no one did. I made sure of that, because Grandma June was proud. Proud to a fault. Never take help from anyone, she used to say. If you can't stand on your own 2 feet, you crawl, but you never beg. So when I found out about her kidney failure, I created a donor account under a fake name. Anonymous contributions routed straight to her clinic. I did it quietly because I loved her. Because she'd raised me when no one else would. And now she'd cut me off. Wasting my life, she said. I laughed. Sounded like choking. What she called wasting was me working double shifts at the diner, tutoring kids online at midnight, skipping meals to cover her bills. What she called wasting was me loving her enough to lie so she wouldn't feel ashamed. But what stung the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that she thought so little of me. That even in her dying days, she couldn't see past her pride long enough to believe I was worth something. I picked up my phone and called her number. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped it. Hello. My Aunt Helen's voice. Smooth, clipped, the kind of tone that turned kindness into currency. It's Emma, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can I speak to Grandma? Silence. Then, she's resting. Resting or avoiding me. She's made her wishes clear, sweetheart. Helen's tone dripped with false sympathy. You should respect that. Blick. She hung up. I sat there staring at the screen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a gnat that wouldn't die. Helen had always hated me. Ever since Mom passed, she made sure I knew I was the outsider, the charity case her mother took in. Grandma defended me then, said I reminded her of Mom. But as the years went by, Helen found ways to chip away at that bond, subtle and sharp. And now, apparently, she'd succeeded. By the time evening came, I couldn't sit still. The rain hadn't stopped all day, and the city lights looked like they were bleeding into the pavement. I drove without thinking, the letter folded in my jacket pocket, my thoughts spinning. I told myself I just needed to see her, to understand. Her house sat on the hill like a relic from another life. White columns, ivy crawling up the sides, the old porch light flickering the way it always had. I used to love that light. It was how I knew I was home. Now it felt like an accusation. I parked across the street, engine off, headlights dimmed. The curtains were drawn, but through a sliver of glass I saw her. Grandma, sitting in her armchair, wrapped in her favorite cream blanket. She looked, well, better than I expected. Her cheeks had color again, her shoulders less frail. I should have felt relief. I didn't. Then I saw him. A man stepped into the room, carrying a tray. He poured her tea, adjusted her blanket, then leaned close to whisper something. She laughed, really laughed, and my heart stumbled. Because I knew that laugh. And I knew him. Ethan. My boyfriend. For a second I thought I was hallucinating. I blinked, rubbed at the glass, but there was no mistake. His broad shoulders, the way he brushed his hair back with his left hand, that familiar easy smile. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have known where she lived. I felt my stomach twist until I thought I might be sick. He leaned down again, said something I couldn't hear. Grandma reached for his hand, squeezed it like they'd known each other forever. My chest burned. Every second stretched thin, trembling. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was helping with deliveries, maybe he'd volunteered somehow, but none of it made sense. Because he'd never mentioned visiting her. Not once. Not in all these months of me breaking myself to keep her alive. I couldn't move. I just watched them through the window like a ghost at my own funeral. When he finally left, he hugged her goodbye. Hugged her like she was his. I stayed there long after his car disappeared down the street, my face cold, my hands gripping the steering wheel until the leather bit into my skin. Then, without realizing, I whispered the only thing that made sense in that moment. She took everything from me once, I said. I won't let her do it again. And for the first time I meant it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. My grandmother's soft smile, Ethan's hand brushing against hers. The image burned into my eyelids, looping endlessly like punishment. By morning my mind was a storm. Questions collided with rage until I couldn't tell where one emotion ended and the next began. I needed answers. When I called Ethan, I half expected him to sound guilty. But his voice was calm, even sweet. "Hey babe," he said. "Did you eat yet?" My throat tightened. "Where were you last night?" There was a pause. Home." "Why?" My nails dug into my palm. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," he chuckled lightly, but there was a hitch in his tone. Too quick, too rehearsed. "Why, what's up?" I wanted to scream, "I saw you." But something stopped me. Maybe I wanted to see how far he'd go. Maybe I needed him to lie so I could stop pretending to love him. "Nothing," I said softly. "Just sounded tired. Thought maybe you worked late." I did. You know how it is. Yeah, I knew. I knew he worked late at lying. We hung up, and I stared at the phone until the battery warning flashed. I didn't cry. The tears were there, pressing at the back of my throat, but anger had already built a wall around them. If he was lying to me, I'd find out how deep it went. By afternoon, I drove back to Grandma's neighborhood, this time parking further down the block. The rain had cleared, leaving the world sharp and too bright. Every shadow looked guilty. Every sound set my teeth on edge. I watched the house for hours. At 3:12 p.m. his car arrived. Silver sedan. Same one he'd driven on our last date. He got out carrying a grocery bag, whistling, casual as ever. I watched him knock once before letting himself in. No hesitation. No guilt. He belonged there. I felt the betrayal crawl under my skin like fire. 2 hours later he left again. That's when I noticed something new. A manila envelope under his arm. He tucked it into his car before driving off. My instinct screamed. When you've loved someone long enough, you start to notice their patterns. The way they scratch their wrist when they're nervous, the way they over-explain when they're lying. Ethan was lying. And whatever was in that envelope was part of it. That night I went digging. I started with Grandma's medical portal, the system where I used to anonymously pay her bills. I hadn't logged in for weeks. When I did, I almost wished I hadn't. The donations I'd set up were gone. Replaced by new ones. Larger ones. From a new contributor. Name, E. Rowe. My stomach dropped. Ethan's full name. Ethan Rowe. At first, I thought maybe he'd found out what I was doing and taken over. Maybe he was trying to help. But then I looked closer. The payment started 2 days after Grandma cut me from her will. It wasn't charity. It was strategy. I clicked on the Authorized Family Access tab, and there it was. His name added as a contact. Someone had given him permission to make decisions about her care. Someone had invited him in. That someone had to be Helen. My aunt always saw money as oxygen. The moment she realized I was paying secretly, she must have told Grandma. And when the truth came out twisted through Helen's mouth, Grandma believed I'd been trying to manipulate her. And Ethan. I didn't even know where to start with that betrayal. I thought about the way he used to touch my hand when we talked about the future. The way he'd say, "You deserve peace, Em." The way he'd listen when I cried about Grandma's illness, pretending to care while sleeping in the home of the woman who'd just disowned me. The world tilted. Felt stupid. Disposable. But somewhere beneath that humiliation, something else began to stir. Something dark and patient. I wasn't done. The next day, I made sure to accidentally run into Helen at the grocery store. She was wearing her usual smug expression, cart full of overpriced wine and imported cheese. "Well, if it isn't the family disappointment," she said, grinning like she'd rehearsed the line. "Nice to see you too," I replied, forcing calm. "How's Grandma?" "She's fine. Better than ever, actually. Ethan's been a godsend." She said his name so casually it made my jaw tighten. "Ethan?" I asked, playing dumb. "As in?" "Oh, don't act surprised," she said. "He's been so helpful." "Wee boy. You really let that one slip through your fingers." Her words felt like acid. "He's helping her." "With what?" "Bills, errands, keeping her company. It's refreshing, you know? Someone who doesn't make everything about themselves." I laughed, a sharp sound that made her eyes narrow. "And what's he getting out of it?" Helen leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a delicious secret. "June's updating her will soon. She wants to make sure her legacy goes to someone worthy." The way she looked at me when she said "worthy" told me everything. I walked away before I did something violent. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. That night, I sat in the dark with a bottle of cheap wine and an ache that wouldn't quiet. My reflection in the window didn't look like me anymore. My face was harder, colder. And in that reflection, I made a promise. I would find out exactly what they'd done. I would make them both choke on their lies. But I wouldn't do it with shouting or tears. I'd do it with patience and precision, just like Grandma taught me. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence. The kind of silence that stretches so thin it hums. The kind that makes people underestimate you. After that night I stopped reacting. I stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped defending myself. Because I knew now, it wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. They'd stolen my grandmother's trust, my love, my dignity. And they'd done it while smiling at me. So I decided to play the long game. I started by watching. I knew Ethan's habits better than anyone. He was predictable. Mornings at the gym, coffee at the same spot on Maple Avenue, then work at the real estate firm. What changed, however, were his evenings. He started leaving early, coming home late. His excuses stitched together with carelessness. I followed him once. He didn't notice, he never did. He was too busy trying to look good for the world, too busy enjoying his reflection to see the shadow behind him. He drove not to the office, but to my grandmother's lawyer's building. He stayed inside for 40 minutes. When he came out, he was smiling. My heart was a drum. My hands trembled against the steering wheel, nails biting into leather. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't innocent. That night I hacked into his laptop. Not the kind of hacking you see in movies, just quiet, calculated snooping. I'd set up his passwords on his devices when we first started dating. Just in case, he'd said. I guess this was the case. There it was, a string of emails between Ethan and Helen. "Helen. She'll sign the new will tomorrow. Once it's finalized, we'll have it all sorted. Don't screw this up. Ethan. Don't worry. She trusts me completely. I'll make sure Emma's name is erased for good." The words blurred. Erased. Like I was never family. Like I never mattered. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the floor vanish beneath me. I'd loved Ethan for 3 years. Shared my secrets, my body, my home. He'd held me when I cried over my grandmother's illness. And all along he was helping her replace me. And Helen had pulled the strings. I scrolled further, each email another stab. Meeting schedules, lawyer contacts, even bank drafts. It was all there. I should have broken down. I should have screamed. But I didn't. Because in that moment I realized something powerful. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd just disappear quietly. They were wrong. The next morning, I put on the dress Ethan had once said made me look soft, the one I hadn't worn in months. I straightened my hair, painted on calm like armor, and drove to Grandma's house. Helen opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Emma, this is unexpected. Is Grandma home?" She hesitated. "She's resting. She doesn't want visitors." "That's fine," I said, brushing past her. "I'll wait." The scent of lavender filled the air. The same as always. Made my chest ache. Grandma sat in her chair, eyes widening when she saw me. Her face had aged even more since the last time. Fragile, lined, but her gaze still sharp. "Emma," she said softly. "You shouldn't be here." I swallowed. "I got your letter." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you know where we stand." "Do I?" "Yes. Because I'm having a hard time understanding how paying for your treatment is wasting my life." Her expression faltered for a fraction of a second. "Helen told me you were lying about that." "Of course she did." I took a step closer. "Did she also tell you Ethan's been helping her forge your will?" Her eyes widened. I pulled out my phone and held up the emails. "Go ahead. Read them." She stared, confusion rippling into disbelief, then horror. Her hand trembled as she took the phone. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I said. "Because you wanted to believe you weren't being used. You wanted to believe the people smiling in your face weren't feeding on your pride." Tears welled in her eyes. "Emma, I didn't come here for forgiveness," I interrupted. "I came here because I want you to see them for who they really are." Behind me, Helen's voice cut through the air. "You little snake." Turn slowly. She stood in the doorway, face red, breathing hard. "You've been spying on us. You've been trying to erase me," I shot back. "So yeah, I did a little digging." Her lip curled. "You think you can just waltz in here and play hero? You're pathetic. You've always been pathetic." I smiled, but it wasn't kind. Funny thing about pathetic people, Helen. They're usually the ones who survive. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. I left before she could respond. Outside, the wind had picked up. The clouds were turning the color of bruises. My heart felt like it had been torn open, but beneath that pain, a strange calm settled. 'Cause now I had proof. The next step wasn't anger, it was justice. I went to the lawyer's office the next morning, pretending to be polite, apologetic even. I said I just wanted to understand my grandmother's wishes. The assistant, charmed by my tears, left me alone for a few minutes while she fetched the files. That was all I needed. I photographed every page of the new will. Ethan's name was listed beside Helen's, each set to inherit half of everything. Not anymore, I thought. When I left that office, I had a plan forming so clearly it scared even me. They wanted to erase me. Fine. I'd erase their lies instead. But I wouldn't go to the police. I wouldn't scream. I'd make them turn on each other. And I'd make them do it publicly. When you love someone who betrays you, revenge doesn't feel like satisfaction. It feels like surgery. Cold. Precise. Necessary. I'd spent years learning how to hide pain behind a calm smile. How to let people underestimate me. It was time to use that. I started with Ethan. 3 days after confronting my grandmother, I called him. My voice was soft, hesitant, the way it used to be when I needed comfort. "Hey," I said. "Can we talk?" He hesitated. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "I've been thinking about us. About how things ended last time we fought." "Yeah," he said cautiously. "I've been thinking too. Can we meet?" There was a pause, then relief in his tone. "Yam. Name the place." We met at our old spot by the lake, The same place he'd once promised he'd never hurt me. The irony nearly made me laugh. He looked nervous when he arrived, but when I smiled, he relaxed instantly. That was his weakness. He always thought he was smarter, smoother, untouchable. "I missed you," he said quietly. I tilted my head, studying him. "Did you?" "Of course," he said, reaching for my hand. "You've been distant lately, I get it. Things with your family." "Don't," I cut in gently. "Don't pretend you don't know what's going on." His hand froze. "What do you mean?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "I know about you and my grandmother." Color drained from his face. It's not what it looks like." "Oh, it looks like you're sleeping with my family for inheritance money," I said lightly. "But maybe you'll convince me otherwise." He swallowed hard, eyes darting. "It wasn't like that. She needed help. Your aunt asked me to." "To what?" I interrupted. "Pretend to care. Play the loyal grandson she never had. Or was it about control, Ethan? Because that's always been your favorite game." He stammered something, an excuse, a plea. I didn't care. I smiled sweetly and said, "Relax. I'm not here to fight. I just want to fix things. For all of us." His brows furrowed. "Fix things?" He nodded. "Grandma's upset. Helen's losing her grip. And you look exhausted. Let me help. I'll talk to her. Maybe we can start over." I watched his eyes light up with cautious hope. He thought I was forgiving him. He thought the girl he'd manipulated still wanted his approval. "Really?" he said softly. "Really?" He reached for my hand again, and this time I let him. His skin felt like fire, familiar, disgusting, intoxicating. "Thank you," he whispered. "You won't regret this." "Oh," I thought, smiling, "I already don't." Because by the time I left that lake, my plan was complete. Step 1 was to plant the seeds. I started visiting Grandma again. Carefully, softly, like someone crawling back after shame. I brought her soup, flowers, a stack of old photographs. I never mentioned the will. I didn't need to. I let her talk. Let her guilt fester. She began to apologize. Little things at first. I might have been harsh. Helen has been under stress. Ethan's been so attentive. I listened, nodding, kind and patient. But in every story she told, I slipped in one quiet question. "Do you ever wonder why Ethan's so interested in your affairs? Do you ever notice Helen leaves when he arrives? Do you ever think people might love you more for what you own than who you are?" Small doubts, harmless on their own. But repetition turns questions into truth. Within a week, Grandma's tone changed. "I think Ethan's getting too involved," she said one afternoon, stirring her tea nervously. "He asked for my account details. I told him no, but..." I placed my hand gently over hers. "You did the right thing." And that was when she started to truly see. Step 2 was Helen. I accidentally texted her one night. An old photo of Ethan and me at the lake, followed by, "Funny how some people never change." 10 minutes later she called me. "What are you playing at?" she snapped. Kept my tone mild. "Just reminiscing. Ethan and I had a nice talk today." "You what?" "Oh, didn't he tell you?" I said innocently. "He said you two were working together on Grandma's will. I didn't realize it was so personal." "Don't you dare twist this, Emma." "I'm not twisting anything," I said sweetly. "Just thought you should know he told me everything. How you roped him in, how you both convinced Grandma to cut me out." There was a pause, a dangerous one. Then she hissed. "He told you that?" Word for word. When I hung up, I could almost hear her panic through the silence. That was the beauty of it. A single seed of doubt could make even allies turn rabid. By morning, Grandma called me. "Emma," she said, voice shaky. "Something's wrong. Helen and Ethan are fighting." My heart leapt, but I kept my tone calm. "About what?" "They won't tell me," she said, almost crying. "But Helen screamed that Ethan betrayed her, and he said she was stealing from me." I don't understand. Closed my eyes. Perfect. Grandma, I said softly. Can I come over? We need to talk. When I arrived, the house felt heavy, charged with tension. Helen was pacing in the kitchen, red-faced, while Ethan stood near the door, jaw tight. They both froze when they saw me. You, Helen spat. This is your fault. Actually, I said calmly, this is what happens when you lie to people who trust you. Grandma stepped into the doorway. Her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Is it true? She asked. Did you both? Neither answered. She turned to Ethan. Were you using me? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence was a confession. Grandma's hands shook. I let you into my home. I trusted you. Helen started to speak, but Grandma raised her voice. Sharp, trembling, furious. Get out. Both of you. Ethan looked at me then, eyes full of hatred and disbelief. He knew I'd orchestrated it. He just couldn't prove it. I met his gaze and smiled faintly. Because in the end, all I'd done was show them the truth. They were the ones who destroyed each other. After that day, the house was silent again, just like before. But it wasn't peace. It was the eerie calm after a storm, when everything looks untouched but you can smell what's been broken. Helen moved out within 48 hours, leaving behind boxes of unpaid bills and half-truths. Ethan disappeared soon after, blocking me on everything. I didn't care. I'd already won. Grandma called me 2 days later. Emma, she said, her voice small. Can you come over? When I arrived, she was sitting in her garden, staring at the roses I'd planted years ago. The same ones she once said were a waste of soil. Do you remember when you first brought me here? She asked quietly. You were 10. You told me you'd build me a garden that never died. I smiled faintly. You said flowers were for people with too much time. He chuckled weakly. I was cruel. I didn't answer. The silence between us was long, heavy, filled with all the things we'd never said. Finally, she looked at me. I owe you an apology. I looked at her, waiting. She swallowed hard. I believed lies because they were easier. Helen told me you were reckless, that you'd wasted your degree, that you'd never do anything meaningful. I thought cutting you out of the will would teach you discipline. Her voice trembled. But you were the one paying my hospital bills, weren't you? He nodded. Anonymous donations, monthly. I didn't want you to know. She covered her mouth with a trembling hand, tears forming in her eyes. Why would you do that after everything I said? Because, I whispered, you're still my grandmother. Her tears fell then, slow and heavy. I don't deserve forgiveness. I looked away, toward the dying sun over the rose bushes. Forgiveness isn't the point. A week later, her lawyer called me. Apparently, Grandma had rewritten her will. Helen was removed completely. Ethan's name, once added secretly through Helen's pressure, was erased too. I was listed as the executor, not the heir, at least not immediately. Half of her estate was to go into a foundation, the Margaret and Emma Hale Trust, supporting caregivers who paid medical expenses for family members in secret. The rest, she said, would come to me, when I learned to use my heart for myself, not just others. It wasn't money I wanted. It was the truth finally written in ink. Still, revenge has a strange aftertaste. It doesn't taste like victory. It tastes like metal, like blood you bit through while keeping quiet too long. One evening, weeks later, I found myself walking by the lake again, the place where it all began and ended. The surface was still, mirroring the autumn sky. I sat on the same bench where Ethan had once told me he'd never betray me. A small part of me missed the simplicity of believing people meant what they said. But the rest of me, the wiser, sharper, more dangerous part, knew better now. I took out my phone, scrolling through the messages I'd saved. The evidence of Ethan's manipulation, the recordings of Helen's backroom deals, the documents Grandma had signed under pressure. I'd kept them not out of spite, but as a reminder. Truth isn't something you uncover once. Something you defend every day. As I sat there, a voice behind me said, You look like someone carrying too much. It was a woman about my age, walking her dog. He smiled kindly. Maybe, I said, smiling faintly. Whoever hurt you, she said softly. I hope they see what they lost. He nodded. They already have. That night, I wrote my grandmother a letter. I never mailed it. I left it folded between the pages of her old Bible when she passed 3 months later. You once said I wasted my life on things that didn't matter. But maybe love isn't supposed to be measured in success or inheritance. Maybe it's measured in who you still choose to help, even when it hurts. I'm not angry anymore. Just tired, and grateful you finally saw me. When I closed the Bible, I felt something inside me unclench, a quiet release like exhaling after years underwater. Months later, I received a final letter from her lawyer. It wasn't legal. It was personal. Grandma had left it with him to deliver. When the garden blooms again. Inside, written in her shaky hand, was one line. You were never wasting your life, Emma. You were saving mine. I cried, not out of guilt or sadness, but because for the first time in years I felt seen. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not exposing Helen or ruining Ethan. Not even reclaiming the inheritance. It was proving that the person everyone dismissed, the quiet, obedient granddaughter, was the one who rebuilt everything after they tore it apart. Because in the end, love isn't weakness. It's the sharpest blade in the room. And I'd finally learned how to wield it.